44th FIDE Chess Olympiad 2022 round 10 recap. Coach JD Cannon is back on the mic today.
Yeah, I'm here because like my favorite game of the whole event happened yesterday, or today. Yeah. I'm super excited about this game. Are you? You feeling good about it, Matt?
Not my favorite game, but we have a new youngster to highlight. I know you like highlighting youngsters. So we're going to look
Yeah.
at India 2 against Uzbekistan. The board number 1, Gukesh D, who had his first draw yesterday after winning, I believe it was 8 games in a row.
Yeah.
And he's playing Nodirbek Abdusattorov, who is only 1 year older, and he's actually just on the verge of 2,700. So if it wasn't for Gukesh D's tournament, I think everyone would be talking about Nodirbek right now.
Yeah, I think that perhaps now he's going to get talked about a bit more because he played a fantastic game today. You want to jump into it?
Yeah, so we got Gukesh D with the white pieces, and this looks very similar to round number 6 when Gukesh D was white against Sargsyan from Armenia.
Yeah, I mean and not so dissimilar from the Carlsen game we looked at because Carlsen played this bishop to g5 here. I mean, we've seen this now 4 times in our recaps that we've reached this sort of Nimzo position, and nobody's playing it the right way. But so Queen A4, as we talked about previously, inducing this Knight C6, E3, castles, Bishop D2. And now A5 is the first new move. What do you reckon the idea of A5 is? I have a theory. I wonder if you have your own theory.
Our theories might match because we did talk about this before we recorded. But I think, yeah, we're protecting the bishop, and that frees the c6 knight to move, probably knight e7. And what that can do for black is it allows black to fight back in the center. So we know D and C will trade. Black probably wants to play c5. So it's kind of a way to go for c5.
Yeah, so essentially this Queen A4 move is gonna cost a few tempi for black, but it's not stopping him from getting the queenside play once. And the last time that Gukesh faced this line, Sargassian played the pawn takes c4 instead of this a5. He responds with a3, and the bishop takes. We get takes, and then knight to e7, sort of highlighting the point of what this a5 was about. He's induced a3. The knight's now moved, and he's ready to just try to strike in the center.
And
So
I
queen
think
c2.
the main thing that white has here is the bishop pair. So let's kind of see how that dynamic plays out. Can Nodirbek try to like use the knights to create outposts to beat this bishop pair?
Yeah. So b6. B6 is a nice move because I think it kind of supports two ideas. C5, as we've been talking about, but also like, we talked a lot about that this bishop is really hampered in this structure with this pawn stuck on e6. And so, b3 gets played now, bishop to a6, showing kind of the other idea behind b6. I quite like this plan for black.
And here we see a mistake by Gukesh D. I think it's a positional mistake. Pawn to a4. And we kind of looked at this before the game and we thought this b4 square is going to be critical. If black gets a knight into b4 later, and this knight goes into e4, let's say, black has two pretty nice outposts for the knights. And what are these bishops doing so far for white? Really, white's not able to utilize this bishop pair yet.
Yeah, and he's still waiting for black to take so that he can develop the bishop. This is kind of slow here.
Yeah.
So yeah, knight e4 happens, and the bishop drops back, and then I really like this move, knight to c6. It's kind of my favorite move of the game, because it's really, I don't know that I could have brought myself to play it. I mean, earlier on, we played knight c6, so we were forced to, we didn't want to. Then we did this finagling work so we could move the knight away from c6, and now you're going to put it right back? What is this about?
So you're telling me you like this move better than a potential Gukesh blunder later on in the game?
I do quite like this. This is quite a nice idea because I think it's pretty difficult to do this. I mean, I think if I were going to even attempt that idea, I'd want to play like c5 first and then I might consider it, but that just doesn't work here. There's tactical problems. But yeah, knight c6, bishop to a3, and now knight to b4, and he doesn't see anything better than to grab it. And this comes back, and where's white's bishop pair?
Yeah, I think that's a nice thing to highlight is the bishop for white was sitting on b2, going all the way across the long diagonal. So if black plays c5 with the bishop on b2, d takes c opens up the bishop. So this is kind of cool. Nordebek waits for that trade to happen, and he's going to play c5 now that the dark square bishop is gone. So bishop d3 played, and here we see a small mistake by black. We think black could have held the advantage here with pawn to f5, but instead he goes knight to f6.
Yeah, I think he got too fixated with this idea of moving his knights back and forth. It worked out so well for him last time. He thought he'd just keep doing it. But yeah, I just felt like that f5 was a really natural way to maintain the knight on the e4 square, and it's to me not so terribly easy to figure out what white's going to do. I mean, so this seems simple, but then we can hit with c5. We're kind of trying to destabilize this knight. Our own knight's quite stable, and yeah, this feels like a nice position to play. I don't see a lot of problems for Nordebek here,
I
but
agree with you.
instead he drops back to f6
And then
and
we
then
see
just castles and now c5. So I'm not sure what the difference is, why he wanted c5 with the knight back on f6. Not clear to me.
You know what I don't like about this, though, c5 with the knight on f6? It's what happens on the next move. D takes c5. The only way to recapture is with the b pawn. Now look at this pawn on a4. It's a protected pass pawn, and that's going to be sitting there for the next like 90 moves. We know this is a long game coming up. That's going to make a big difference in terms of the imbalances. That protected pass pawn in the endgame could cause black some headaches.
I I also see an idea that, like, for example, I mean, Gukesh had or Nordebek has a little bit less flexibility because, for example, a move he might want to make. Let's just give a random move. He can never really capture here because when I can take and you take, and I have here. Not only do I have this pass pawn, but I'm leaving myself with a backwards c pawn, and this c pawn's a little bit weak, or maybe more than a little bit weak, but it's even weak without this trade. Just sitting here on c5, this is probably the weakest pawn on the board, and we he goes after it with, I mean, e4 captures, and yeah, this pawn is forever going to be a target, and it's going to cause Nordebek quite a few problems, and ultimately ought to have cost him the game.
And I think that's a really nice positional idea. When Gukesh plays e4 and trades off the d pawn, the c5 pawn lost his buddy. That makes c5 that much weaker. So just like JD mentioned, we got the weakest pawn on the board, c5, and we have the passed a pawn. So now it's definitely white that's playing for the win at this point. And we see rook a7, knight e5, and all of a sudden you see like this knight and bishop are much better placed than this knight and bishop. We got the weakest pawn on the board and probably the strongest pawn on the board, and white's more quick to jump on the d file because both rooks are ready to come over.
But Matt, bishops are better than knights. Why am I just leaving this out? Why am I doing this? This seems like initially seems like it's a little bit of a counterintuitive point, but I think I understand why.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think the bishop doesn't have enough scope on a6. Is that what you were going to say?
no, I don't think it is. I don't think it has to do with that at all. I think it has to do with, explain to me how I'm going to defend this pawn with this bishop.
Yeah, good point. How do you defend that weakest pawn when the knight's going to just like plant on d3 later for white?
Yeah, and whereas the knight, I can clearly see how this knight can come and defend this pawn. And conversely, how is this bishop ever going to attack the pawn on c5? It's not. So it's great, actually. I think that he was totally happy to give up his light squared bishop, as happened, because it means that his remaining minor piece is actually able to fight on the part of the board where there's a weakness, whereas the light squared bishop, not so much.
Yeah, I agree with you. And let's say black plays bishop to b7 here, poking at the queen. A strong reply is simply queen d3, saying either you're going to trade queens or give me the d file. And if you trade queens, knight takes. Look at this pawn already. Rook e5 coming, double attack on it. I mean, black's going to have to sit and play defensively with these kind of moves. White's other rook is going to get active. This is just all white territory, right? White's never going to lose this position, you would think.
For sure. So rook to d8 happens, queen to f3. Queen comes back to c7, a little bit of shuffling, and they fight for the d file. And Gukesh is happy to trade pieces because, I mean, the pawn ending, if we extrapolate to that, the pawn ending is easily winning for white. So that tends to suggest that he wants to trade off more and more pieces. Even the knight versus bishop ending almost certainly is going to be one for white. So the rooks and the queens are really Nordebek's only hope.
Yeah, I think especially the queen. That gives you perpetual check chances. Could black win a piece here, JD? Rook takes d1 check and then pick up the knight.
Sure. I mean, I suppose you can, but I mean, technically, you're very much up a knight right now,
Yeah, +3.
and you get to enjoy that for one move.
Yeah.
So rook c8 happens, which is sort of a sad move that he's now lining up behind the c5 pawn and just having to sit there.
And the best move there was to play rook takes rook, but not allow back rank mate. So he should have traded, and I think he regrets this decision because after queen g3, h5, shoring up the back rank mate issues, h3. Now he puts the rook right back on d8, but really he should have just traded immediately. It would have been a lot cleaner.
Maybe it doesn't make much difference. So rook takes, I mean, he's just slowly getting outplayed here. Adding up additional pressure, c5, and you've got to try to defend this pawn. But now queen e3, and this pawn's indefensible. So he gets the bishop coming to b7. It's really the most active square, and he's got to hope that somehow his queen's going to infiltrate and cause problems, either from d5 with mating threats or coming to d1. Yeah, so but Gukesh shuts it down immediately.
And what I like about this plan by Gukesh, he knows he can take this pawn on c5 at any point. It can't be defended twice, it's attacked twice. What he's trying to do is limit the counterplay. So he plays f3, he plays king f1, and I think his plan here is to bring the king to e2 and then take this pawn, knowing that this queen can't infiltrate on d1. So he's just kind of shutting down all the counterplay first, and then he's going to take c5.
Yeah, so e5 happens. I like e5. I mean, I suppose the idea might be that we're going to give our queen some space this way. Maybe we'll play e4 and try to expand the scope of the bishop.
Yep.
So I'm just going to win a pawn. Thank you. The bishop's got to move. Undefended. So the king comes to e1. And now bishop f5. Again, just looking for the most active squares that he can really get. There's not that many. It's difficult to see how he's going to get the counterplay he needs, though. a5 happens. Queen to c7. a6 happens.
Push that pawn. Push him, baby. And a good takeaway here is oftentimes when you have a passed pawn, if you can push it safely, it's almost always the best move. That pawn gets exponentially stronger as it goes up the board, and players will, I mean, even if you ignore a computer eval, players will tend to forget how quick that pawn is moving up the board, so it can cause problems for your opponent.
All right. Knight to d3 is an interesting move because it seems like he's going to give up the pawn. But if you take the pawn, which he does, we're going to get one of these pawns back. So takes here, and he takes on e5. Was there anything to taking on b4?
It looks like queen to a5 is a little bit annoying, pinning the knight. And let's say you break. It's
difficult to break that pin.
Yeah, if you try to break the pin, bishop back to b7. And I think white has to be a little bit careful here because this king is stuck out in the middle with some counterplay coming from the queen. So I think the way Gukesh played it was a bit more solid. It's actually kind of using this pawn to help defend some dark squared checks against the king.
I also think that one of the reasons why you might take the e pawn is that, like, at some point, I mean, the pawn on e5 is defensible at some point. Maybe
really
you
good
can
point.
play f6. Maybe you can do something. That pawn, I can find a way to defend it. The pawn on b4, that's indefensible.
That's probably the best point. Yeah, the pawn on b4 is going to die. Knight takes b4 at some point. So coming up here, queen takes e5, queen b6. There were a couple 5 or 6 minute thinks by Gukesh D. And at this point, you look at the eval bar, we're looking at over a 5 pawn advantage. This should be completely winning for white. And I think this is really instructive. There is a path here that I believe it's very easy and straightforward to pull out the win. And it starts with queen to e8 check, and then bring the queen back to e4 check. And now king e2. This is a very subtle move, but here's the idea. I want to create an endgame with the knight and bishop off the board, queen against queen. And if one set of pawns trades, that's perfectly fine. All I need to do is have queen versus queen with the extra pawns sitting here on c4. that's going to be a win for white, because what white can do is he can tuck the king over on h2.
Show
You
us. Show us.
use the queen to
Make 'em-
guard the diagonal. Okay, so let's say queen f6, take pawn. After a couple checks, this knight gets traded and that set of b pawns gets traded. Oh, this one's going to be perpet. Okay, sorry, we had a couple variations here. So at this moment, queen to c6 is perpet, right? Black can just keep checking forever. Queen to d4, giving
Which
back.
highlights why we didn't actually win the bishop there. It was just a trade.
Yeah, right. We can't allow the draw. But this is going to be a winning position because this king can hide on h2 with the queen on this diagonal, so not allowing any checks. And then you can use the queen and pawn together to start marching up the board. So these are wins like all day long. You can always put the king back on g1 on the first rank if needed, or h1, and only when there's a check bring it up to h2. So there's a lot of maneuverability. And another nice thing for white here is this h-pawn also drops. So you can check, win this pawn, and now you get this winning endgame, extra pawn on the king side and the extra c-pawn. What do you think, Shady? Straightforward enough?
I don't know. I still want to see you beat Stockfish with this in this line. I think it's blunderable for a mere measly NM.
Yeah, I think Stockfish could hold. Stockfish will probably beat me. Maybe that we'll do a new video on that.
Yeah.
Stockfish beats Matt in a lost endgame.
So Gukesh didn't have Matt whispering in his ear, and so he chose this knight c5 idea. And the next phase of the game is this is where he starts to kind of go wrong, and gets himself kind of loses some of his advantage. And king to d1, he keeps trying to. He's going to bring his king over to this side of the board instead of hiding it on the h square. And yeah, as we just see that they're shuffling around, he's not making progress. And all of a sudden he finds himself in a dead equal position now. The counterplay is legitimately real against this b3 pawn, and there's no really good way for him to advance the position. He can't attack with the queen alone. The knight's now frozen. The king is a little bit unhappy looking, and we get shuffling for several moves now, just kind of flashing along, draw, still draws. Just making subtle threats here and there until we get this situation where he plays knight f7 and then king h5, and we get a fantastic move coming up. This is my favorite move that Gukesh played in this game. So we already looked at my favorite move from Nodirbek, but king to c5 is just a blunder. It appears that your idea is that you want to maybe take this pawn and you think that you can to create winning chances there, but really the best move he had to play is queen to e3 check, defends this pawn, and it has a pretty nasty threat.
Yeah.
So for example, if you say you just go to try to capture a pawn, well, that's just checkmate immediately. So you have to play g5, and now knight to d6. We're threatening to get the bishop, and this is quite nice. And perhaps maybe you didn't see this, but you can't take the pawn because you just get mated. Queen e8 check. Only move is to come here. We get h8 check. Again, you don't have much in the way of options. You come here, we give a check. Again, you don't have any real option. You come back to h5, it's going to be a mate here, which we're going to force you to do that anyway. So you come to h6. Now this comes with check, and like something like this could have happened. I mean, okay, it wouldn't have. They would have certainly not fallen for this. But the point is that queen to e3 maintains a draw, and king c5 makes me happy. That's the difference.
and king c5 isn't completely losing, but this puts it in black's court. Black has the advantage now, and these pawns are they're dropping really quickly. So queen takes f3 played. Queen takes f6. It's a good move. You're threatening a mate, so there's no capture of this pawn. But now there's this nice queen to e3 check by Nodirbek, which also guards the mate square and watches over h6 as well. King takes b4. And bishop takes h3. So the reason this is working is because the king has the g4 square. Otherwise, white's threatening this mate. Queen to h6 check, queen h8 check, queen blocks, and mate. But this is just working out for black. And what do you think of this endgame? Just looking at the pieces on the board and the imbalance, bishop versus knight.
Well, I feel like that black should be a bit better. And I think it's because this pawn is further advanced and therefore threatening more. It's as you would say, exponentially stronger than the white pawns, which aren't quite so far advanced. Oh, nice. I see your coffee mug there. I didn't. When do I get one of those?
Little ChessGoals Yeti.
Yeah, yeah.
When Gukesh
So,
wins the board prize, I'll send you one.
yeah, okay. All
It's gonna
right.
say Gukesh on it though too. Hope that's okay.
All right, fair enough. And then the other reason that I think that black should be preferred is this bishop can both support the black pawns, and because of its long range ability, it can help stop the white pawns at the same time. So this position is probably not lost, but it's certainly become uncomfortable for Gukesh to play. And he makes a few more moves, 95. They're getting into time trouble here. He's going to try to advance the position. And it's interesting that he wouldn't choose to just take, wouldn't choose just to take. This seems like that you would have really good drawing chances in that line. Instead, he probably still thinks he's winning, and he's just not. Few more moves. It looks like they're doing more of the shuffling that they already done. I don't even know if the players realized that the evaluation had changed so much. Wants a queen trade would be really great for black. Doesn't get it, and attacks the knight, and the knight tries to go and hide, but this is just not a good square. This is a puzzle rush. We see that the knight and the queen converge on a square, and lights out. Gukesh, the reign of Gukesh is over.
I mean, that's a pretty simple blunder to miss, but like you said, they were under time pressure. But being that they were under time pressure, just going back a little bit, I'm surprised there wasn't a knight takes d7 right here. I'm very surprised because even though the players don't see the stockfish eval, the black pawn is already on black's 5th rank. White's furthest pawn is on their 4th rank. And the bishop should be stronger than the knight. So unless Gukesh D felt that maybe, the forks or the checkmate threats would allow him to still get the win, I'm shocked that he didn't just go for this trade and say, okay, I'm going to go for perpetual check. Knight takes
I think
d7.
it is a mentality thing, though, because, I think it shows his desire to win, and probably why he got himself to the situation he's in. Because you're saying that I'm worse, therefore I want to trade off the bishop because the bishop's a better piece. But as any good bullet and blitz player will tell you, in time trouble, the knight is always worth more.
That's true. Yeah.
And I wonder if that didn't factor into his thinking at all, was that having the knight in a time trouble situation might give him opportunities to win that he wasn't going to get without the knights on the board.
So maybe the practical chances are 50-50 playing this out, knight versus bishop, right?
Yeah.
Knight's trickier. So interesting game. I mean, these two players are honestly going to be the future of chess, I think, along with Fallujah. Like, those three are going to be in the top 10 for a long time. I think it's really cool how they fought for blood. Neither player really wanted the draw in this game, like even right down to the very end. And Nodirbek, amazing tournament so far with the Uzbekistan team. Should we flip over to the standings?
Yeah. Uzbekistan and this makes Uzbekistan and Armenia are both still tied for first place. Armenia creamed Azerbaijan, which was a heck of a result for them because they were
3-1.
Pretty severely outrated. U.S. took down Turkey. Not terribly surprising there. Fabi did have a really nice game. I think his game was one of the first ones to end today. Like, he's tired of everyone like talking trash on him for how terrible he's done. He's finally starting to play like his rating a bit.
You sent me a text like 3 hours in.
Yeah.
You sent me a text like 3 hours in. Fabi already won. I was like, what? Yeah, India beat Iran 2.5, 1.5. And what about Serbia?
I think one of the teams that have been watching and been happy with, I'm quite happy with Serbia. I mean, they didn't quite have the promise of say your India 2 team, but I think that they are performing far, far above their seed. I don't know what their seed ranking was, but they're actually tied with the U.S. right now.
They were 23rd seed, and they're currently tied for, which place is this? 6th?
Yeah, 5th place. They're tied for 5th place.
Wow.
So, I mean, they're performing excellently. I think that the Serbians going to be pretty happy with how things are going on today.
You know which team is really surprising me as well? And they're tied with Serbia, Moldova. They beat Norway today, 2.5.
Norway today. Yeah.
And the only game that Norway won was Hammer on board 2. They lost on boards 3 and 4, Norway did.
Yeah, and interestingly, Magnus drew against someone rated almost 400 points below him. Not even a GM, an IM. Drew against an IM rated a lot beneath him.
2490, yeah. So let's look
Yeah.
at the pairings going into... Oh, maybe they're not up yet.
Yeah, there's a good chance they're not up yet.
They are
There's
up. I
probably
had to do
still...
a refresh. Okay, so we got Germany, board 1, against India 2. Interesting. Okay, so India 2 is on board 1, but their match points are 16. The two leading teams, they're on boards 2 and 3, respectively. So we have Armenia against Spain on board 2, and Uzbekistan against the Netherlands on board 3.
And who does the U.S. have to take on?
India 1 on board number 4. So
India 1.
That's 4 good matchups. I think those are going to be really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think by rating, India 1 might be the strongest team the U.S. has had to face yet.
Yeah, they're the 2 seed. So we got a 1 seed against 2 seed this round. And the U.S. needs this win. Like, they got to catch back up. A draw won't do it.
It's the last round tomorrow. So, like, they have to win, and they also need Uzbekistan and Armenia and to all lose.
Based on rating, Armenia and Uzbekistan are both playing stronger teams. So if you look at the seed numbers, Spain and Netherlands are the favorites in those games. So this could get a little bit crazy. I mean, I don't know if the U.S. gets Spain and Netherlands to both win, then it won't come down to tie breaks against those other 2 teams.
Yeah.
But how are we doing on tie breaks? Let's look at that real quick.
Not so well.
So we have 297.5 tiebreak points, which is way lower than India 1. So obviously we need to beat them.
We have the least number of board points of any team that's currently on the same number of match points that we have.
Yeah, our board points 24.5 are really low, but it's the tiebreak 2 that's going to matter first. And that's never going to be a tie. So really it doesn't come down to the individual game points, most likely. But look at this. All these teams are crushing us on tiebreak 2. Uzbekistan, Armenia, India 2, India. Like any sort of tie for first, we can't win at all. So yeah, we need Netherlands to win. We need Spain to win so that we can leapfrog those top 2 teams. We will beat India, and then, or we will need to beat India, and then India 2 also needs to lose, I think.
Yeah.
Or draw. If they draw, that'll be fine because we'll pass them. So it's a long shot, but it's possible.
It's all, I was trying to figure out the easiest moment where we could have changed this whole ship was the Shanklin pre-move problem.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's really aware of that the entire situation would be vastly different if he had not done that crazy thing where he touched his king.
Yeah. I feel bad for him. That's just one of those moments. You're under pressure. Tried to pre-moving OTB, like just doesn't always work.
Sometimes you get caught touching your king in public, and this is what happens.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know about that, but maybe we can do that and talk about it in another video, JD.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
See you tomorrow.